What is up, Hospitality MD audience? My name is Kyle, and we are back with another episode of our show presented right here on YouTube. Before we get started, please be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications for this channel, like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. This week's episode is from the archives. This is an interview that I conducted with Jen Salerno several months ago, so I apologize to both Jen and our audience for the delay in releasing it. This one is a gold mine, and it's all about connecting the dots between the world of events and the rest of the vast hospitality industry that we live in. This was super insightful. Jen has an amazing background working in hotels, in sales, catering, operations roles. She also has experience in convention visitors bureaus and housing bureaus for large citywide conventions. One more important update is that the Hospitality MD debut documentary film titled Follow Me and I Will Be Behind You just won the Best in Category award at the Reading International Film Festival. We are so excited to share that with you guys, so stay tuned for more updates on when you'll be able to see the film publicly. And if you missed our trailer, be sure to check it out right up here or here. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but definitely check out our trailer. Guys, enjoy this video, enjoy the interview, and I'll see you at the end. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hospitality MD podcast. I'm your host, Kyle, and we are here today with the one and only Jen Salerno from the Room Block podcast, a great friend and an awesome hospitalitarian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle. I am absolutely honored to finally be on the show. Your podcast is the first hospitality podcast I ever listened to.
That is so awesome to hear that. And it honestly blows my mind because I'm like, sometimes doing like SEO research, like what podcasts show up when you search it. And I'm like, our SEO sucks, quite frankly, because I will search it and I've never seen Hospitality MD pop up like on Apple Podcasts right away for some reason. So we'll have to talk more about how you actually discovered it, but that means so much that that you have listened to it and that you're a fan of the show. Greg and I were actually on the Room Block as well not too long ago. And now Jen is here on Hospitality MD. And actually for your first guest appearance blowing my mind here. I thought I just kind of assumed that you had been a guest on like other people's shows because you're really good at what you do, but I guess this is exclusive, right, guys? So Hospitality MD audience, you are listening to an exclusive interview with Jen Salerno. So, Jen. Ooh,
there you go. There's some SEO for you,
Yes, perfect.
Well, it makes sense. If you were the first I listened to, then I can be the first time guest on your show. So I like the firsts.
I love the significance as well. It's beautiful. I love how we did that. So, Jen. I'm going to ask you the question that you probably know is coming your way that, we ask all the guests here on Hospitality MD, your enunciation moment. This is going back as far as you can remember, right? The first moment that you felt hospitality, that moment that you can't turn away from.
All right. I will try to pinpoint that. And I won't lie. I have thought about this question because I have heard you ask the question so many times. And it actually, I'm happy that I had time to think about it because it gave me a trip down memory lane, to be honest. And it made me rethink my whole career to really as far as how did I get here? Because I always say I fell into it, but maybe I didn't when I think about it. So when I was a child, my family did like to travel quite a bit. My dad kind of lived for going on the next vacation. And we didn't go anywhere crazy. We spent a lot of time going to Wisconsin, just to our to our place up in Wisconsin, in Door County, over the summers. But we also would get on an airplane and travel. You know, we go to, went to Disney World a few times, some other locations in Florida. We're crazy. We were still, a family of four. We weren't, we were very just middle class, but we did get to travel at a young age. And that was always exciting, right? I mean, you have talked about it on the show with other guests, just the getting on the airplane, stepping into a hotel. I mean, I relate to all of that. But the big trip, there's two big ones. And the first one that I really remember is being significant as far as this being a possible career. We took the Amtrak train to Glacier Lodge in Montana. Have you ever been out that way?
No, Greg has, to Montana specifically. I don't know if you're here or you can speak, Greg, but are you familiar with that hotel? Maybe not.
Maybe
Okay.
not.
Maybe
Well,
not.
it's incredible. I mean, it's just, I remember stepping off the train and you stepping into this vast expanse of the sky and grass and mountains. And so during that stay, there were a whole bunch of like college age kids working. And that was like what they did for the summer. And my dad was just like, "Oh, Jen, I hope that you get to do this someday. Like, my dream for you would be, take a summer, go work at a hotel, go work at a lodge like this. Just like, please do that, and integrate this into your life, because it's just such a cool experience." And I think he went to college in Colorado and he didn't last very long because he became a ski bum. And I think he was just like, how can you like integrate this leisure lifestyle into a career? And so I think that was just kind of like a thought in his mind. So
little did he know that it's not leisure at all. When you actually start working, it's actually some of the most, like, the hardest work that you can really do. But you're in a nice location.
Well, right. Maybe it was more of the leisure surroundings or the tourism aspect, right? But yeah, so I don't know. I guess that must have just stuck in my head, because I didn't have any intention actually of going to school for hospitality. I did not. I went to school for media studies. It was more of an academic format. I mean, that honestly had nothing to do with anything. I did want to be a journalist. That was my original intent. I wanted to be a journalist. So, but when I graduated school, I had no idea what I wanted to actually do. I didn't have a job lined up. And that is how I ended up working at the Palmer House as a concierge. And so when I think about what my dad had taught me about travel and about the importance of integrating fun into your life and leisure and tourism into your life, maybe that just kind of worked hand in hand. And I started at that Palmer House and I was hooked. Never thought it could be a career, but standing in that lobby, if anyone has seen the lobby of the Palmer House, it is a phenomenal, beautiful, spectacular looking place. And I remember getting up into that lobby thinking, I could work in here. This could be a job. And so I did. So I don't know if that's one exact moment, but I'm just trying to blend, my experience growing up and then getting into the hotel and realizing, wait, maybe this could be a thing.
That's usually how it works. And there's actually, because I've been asking this question for a while, but it wasn't until I read a book called Second Mountain by David Brooks that I really started specifically dialing in on the verbiage that I use to ask this question and making sure that it is consistent on every single episode. And that's where I heard the phrase for the first time, enunciation moment. And in the book, David Brooks says that typically an enunciation moment happens when you're a child, and typically you forget about it because in your adolescence and things of that nature, that time frame in your life, distractions come and they kind of take you away from that. But eventually at least you hope, right? And that's actually the goal, is that you eventually go back to that enunciation moment at some point in your life. So you do live a life that is fulfilling. And, he argues that when you see people who are not happy, or they don't feel fulfilled, or they're not living their purpose, it's because somewhere they have an enunciation moment that they're not acting on, or they haven't realized yet. So that's why I get so specific with this question now. And I think what you described is exactly that. You have this moment as a child, what your dad said, like, think about all the conversations you had with your dad that you've forgotten about, that have just evaporated, right? Something about his enthusiasm, at least you communicated that way, very enthusiastic about, I just want this for you. I want you to do this. And it stuck with you, and it was meaningful to you. And you have that, and then you forget about it. And it wasn't until you actually had a chance to live your enunciation moment that it clicked that, wow, this is something that is just beautiful and amazing. And that's what I love, is discovering these moments for people. When you got bit by the bug of hospitality, because it is certainly a trap for those. If it's actually your calling, it's definitely a trap that you can't get out of. And even sometimes, if it's not your calling, this industry just has a way of sucking you right back in, even if you try to leave. If you want to leave, I guess, for some people. Have you experienced that? Have you ever thought, I'm done with this industry, I want to leave? Or there's just, man, I'm just not built for this. Have you ever doubted your commitment to the industry?
Well, if it didn't happen after this past year, I don't think it was going to. No.
True.
I would say, working at the Palmer House, I went from concierge and then worked my way up through the convention services department. And that was a fascinating experience to go through, because talk about getting into a department where it's like the nights and the weekends, and like very intense, really intense job, especially at a property like that, because you're servicing the groups that come into the hotel. And they can have a breakfast that starts at 6:30. You need to be at that hotel at 5:30 or 6, and then they have a dinner that ends at 8, and you're still there. I mean, like, these are long days, right? All my friends, they're out, they're going out, it's on the weekends, and I'm like, I'm working. So there was a certain point in time where I thought, I don't think this is sustainable for the kind of life that I feel like I'll eventually want to have. So I thought, I need to learn something else. Sales would have been the reasonable route to go, maybe. And I did eventually go there, but I had no desire to at the time, because sales, when you're in convention services, and sales team is selling the dream and we're servicing the nightmare, you're like, I don't want to be those people. I can't do that. But
going to the dark side, right? It's like betraying ops. And it's kind of like, and we talked about this with Nikki and Robin from Don't Look Under the Bed.
Yeah.
The 501 club, 501, the office is empty.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
right.
They're all going over to the bar down the street, and I'm like frantically still getting BEOs done and trying to secure a signature on the BEOs, whatever. Yeah, it was just.
Yeah, thank you. You sold the dream, and now you're going whining and dining and having a great time going home, and you're standing there watching as sales walks out the door at 501, going to enjoy their lives, and you say, how the hell did I end up here?
Kind of. So I wouldn't say that I wanted to leave the industry at that time. I just realized, okay, like, this is hard. Like, this is going to be an intense job. Again, like I said, I knew it wouldn't be sustainable for me, because I felt like I was going to have other goals down the line that I would not be able to meet if I stayed in that kind of position. So
how long did you,
yeah.
How long did you have this kind of lifestyle, if you will, of being in convention services and nights, weekends, 15-hour days?
It's funny because it feels like it was a decade, but when I look back on it, it was really only a few years. I was at the hotel in over 9/11, 2001. And that was a really fascinating time to be there. And I think it made it feel a lot longer than it actually was. But all in, I was in from concierge to leaving the Palmer House, which was when I was in convention services. It was really only about 4 years. So
You
not that
worked
long.
enough hours. You worked enough hours in that time that it was a decade's worth of work, I think.
Yeah. And when once you go from an hourly salary to a or hourly to salaried employee, don't ever try to figure out what your hourly rate is once you become salary when you work at a hotel and convention services. Because I was like, oh wow, I'm making like $5 an hour, like, when you add it all up. But
Yeah, that's one way to be discouraged and possibly depressed very quickly about the amount of money you're making.
yeah, but there we were paid in other ways, right? Like, I mean, just in experience and in the camaraderie. And this is something I think we discussed when you guys were on my show, the irreplaceable camaraderie of working on property. So
Yeah, it's definitely unlike any other. I'm sure you're still friends with people that you worked with at the Palmer House.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that'll never go away. It's like you go into war with somebody, like you're going into battle with another person, or with a team of people. And I think, you know, I think that's actually one reason why, we talk about the trap, right? Of you start and then it's hard to leave sometimes, even if it's not your calling, even if it's not your enunciation moment coming to fruition. But no matter what, there is an undeniable sense of accomplishment, sense of teamwork that I believe, like, you know what, we're going to have to bring like a psychologist onto the show and talk about how that probably releases some sort of endorphins or serotonin or something in your brain that actually leaves you wanting more.
I love that idea because
I
there
actually
has
would
to be
love
something to it.
There's got to be some like science behind why people stay in this type of industry, even if sometimes it feels like it's the worst thing for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
such a love-hate type of conflict sometimes. But maybe we do
Yeah.
that episode together. We've been wanting to collab on one.
I like that idea. But like,
Okay.
please tell us, how did we get here and why? How did this happen? What happens
Right.
in our brains? No.
We can't justify this individually. We need somebody to tell us what's wrong with us that would keep us in this industry for so long, and tell everybody else too what's wrong with them. But no, I mean, it's something special, and there's got to be a reason for it. So yeah, well, I think we'll make that happen.
Well, so here's the thing, and this is going to talk about why the industry remained enticing to me. And I think it's going to be different because you have worked in hotels, but you haven't necessarily worked in other aspects of this industry, right?
Me personally, yep,
Yeah,
just hotels, right? No
right.
other, just rooms division, pure hotel operations for me.
So here I am at the Palmer House in this, this convention services again. Like, what else can I do here? Because I actually really like this industry. And the next position that I held is, I think, the reason that I stayed for so long. And that is, I went to work for True Chicago, or which at the time was called the Chicago Convention and Tourism Bureau. And it was a culture shock for sure, because that whole it was really 501 club across the board there. It was going from a hotel with the camaraderie of these very young employees, with everything we just discussed. Now I go to McCormick Place, and we had an office in the basement of the convention center, and it was like silent, because if there wasn't an event happening in McCormick Place, there was nobody there, nothing around, just the office and the employees, and there was no bar to go to down the street. 5 o'clock happened and everybody just left. And I was like, this is really different. However, it was an amazing experience because it showed me everything that this industry had to offer. It was like all of a sudden I went from being, in a hotel, think of like ultra laser focus into one little section of hospitality. Now I'm up 10,000 feet up in the air, looking at everything that the industry has to offer. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, we're talking about the museums, other event venues, the restaurants. And then that was my first true exposure to citywide events.
So, excuse me, can you just educate us for a second here? Because I'm sure there's people who are listening in the audience who are not familiar with this. Maybe their local municipality doesn't have this offering in the community, or maybe, we have a front desk agent or somebody listening who just doesn't know that this exists. So what is the role of a convention visitors and tourism bureau such as Choose Chicago in the community, and how does that impact the hotels in that community?
Sure. Well, convention bureaus are generally membership organizations. So, in Chicago, for example, the hotels or other venues that are important to the city's tourism, so, restaurants, museums, whatever, are members, or the convention bureau tries to attract them to be members. And the benefit of being a member of a convention tourism bureau is that then the bureau connects the members with the conventions that come into the city. And the more members that exist within the convention bureau's offerings, the more the convention bureau can use those to entice business to come into the city. And so Choose Chicago is basically the marketing arm of tourism for the city of Chicago. Now, I mean, the city of Chicago has its own tourism department, and I might be speaking out of turn because, to be honest, it's been years since I worked at Choose Chicago, and I think there has been some blending of the tourism offices within the city and Choose Chicago itself. So I don't want to speak to exactly what its role is right now, but essentially its job is to bring convention business into the city and tourism business as well. But when I was there, at least primarily it was convention business.
Right. So we're talking about really bringing guests to the hotels and driving the tourism economy in the city at scale. Like,
yes,
because I mean, and I think we've realized this during the pandemic. A lot of top 25 markets, which are still struggling immensely to this day, a lot of your large box hotels, urban properties, we realize how much that we rely on those things, because for those who don't know, and for those who do, but what happens, right, when we have international travel and we have compression coming in, and when these CVBs bring all these guests at one time descending on the city for a specific reason, well, rates go up, right? Because there's a lot of demand.
Yep.
It's not just the hotels, but it's in Chicago, for example, it's the architectural boat tours. It's the taxi cab industry. It's the restaurant industry. It's everything.
I mean,
seriously.
It is crucial. Like a city like Chicago, or which we mentioned, first tier, second tier, third tier city. So just big, large cities that truly rely on this kind of business to help drive their economy, because you are bringing in just hundreds of thousands of people sometimes at once. So it's working there was just such an incredible exposure to how it all really needs to work together. Everything relies on each other.
So when you were in convention services, you were servicing events that were coming down on the silver platter from the CVB.
I was.
And did you know it at the time? Like, did you understand the relationship when you were working in convention services, or was that really like that kind of light bulb moment was when you were like, oh, now I get it. Now I see what it means to be at the hotel level and why this is so important. Or now I see why my role is so important for the hotels like the Palmer House or others for that matter. What was that? When did it click for you?
That's a great question, because I don't think that I realized it as a convention service manager, because the reason is I was working at the Palmer House, which in itself was a convention, considered a big box property. We had a ton of meeting space. And so the majority of what I was doing was also servicing in-house meetings and conventions, self-contained business that was using our ballroom or multiple ballrooms or the whole property, if you will. And I mean, that's where most of your focus kind of has to go. Then you're also at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, we've got a room block only, citywide event coming in. And you're like, well, these are easy. All you have to do is, it's only sleeping rooms, but so honestly, no. When I was at the hotel, it was kind of like, what is this business? It's easy. It's low maintenance. Now being on the other side of things, yes, maybe certainly more low maintenance than your in-house program where you also have to do hundreds of BEOs to get the food and beverage all taken care of, meeting space, AV, all that. I mean, totally different, but still important, still. And that's kind of what my desire is to really make sure that hotels and other hospitality venues and aspects understand how important that kind of business really is to the city, and how everyone needs to work together to make sure that those kind of things can be successful, so we can continue to attract that business to Chicago or any other large city that relies on that kind of business.
So one thing that I want to make sure that everybody understands here is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Palmer House, I think it's significant that let's run down the specs real quick, because you do say there's self-contained business within the Palmer House in terms of events, rooms, the whole shebang. Yeah, we're talking about the second largest hotel in Chicago at 1,641 rooms and 130,000 square feet of meeting space. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, so
been a long time, but
yeah, no, I believe it's
hall,
130,000. Like, we're talking about just massive in-house meeting and events capabilities. What literally keeps that hotel going, like, it cannot exist without those food and beverage programs, without those in-house meetings. So it's almost like a convention center with a hotel to a certain extent. It's not 1.2 million square feet like McCormick Place, but you can do a lot of damage with 130,000 square feet of meeting space. That's for sure. So what you've discovered is that this relationship is important after having been on both sides. Do you think that there is a room for improvement, maybe, or that there are schisms that need to be addressed between these related but seemingly distant universes? How do you feel about that?
I would say, well, there's probably always room for improvement, right? It's not to speak to any one entity doing it wrong, but I look at it more of the more each party, so your convention organizer, your meeting planners, I mean, and it honestly doesn't even have to be just on a citywide scale. I mean, we're talking about anyone that's bringing a meeting, a convention, some kind of group business into a hotel. The more they, and then the people on the other side, the hotel side, and I'm talking about every department, the more they understand the importance of, and the just the roles that each play in the success of and over the big picture, the better off everyone's going to be. Because I think that this industry, and especially now, it's kind of dangerous because there's a lot of very seasoned people who really knew what they were doing and did understand the importance of how this all works together. They are gone. There's a lot of people who have left, and we've lost a lot of talent. And now we're bringing in fresh people, and I think just this education has to continue, just so everyone understands, like, you're not just checking someone in and giving them a room. You're doing something much bigger than that. If you allow yourself to see the very, very, very big picture of what it means to have that kind of business come, not just into your hotel, but into your city, because it all plays just a very large part in, the success.
I have chills because I'm like, we don't talk about this with our people at the hotels. We really don't. Um, and what a shame that is. And I feel like I'm responsible too, because how many times have I been, um, I worked as a front office department head at a hotel connected to McCormick Place. And I failed to communicate this with my team. And it's so important, I think, Jen. I think you're totally right.
Well, it is, but you can't discount what you're going through when you're working at a hotel. There's just not that much time. However,
That's for
I mean,
sure.
we've talked about it before, I think, just totally offline, you're the front office manager, you get that resume, which for people listening that might not know, resume is something that uh, the convention service manager completes and fills out about an incoming group. So it's to educate each department, XYZ group, it's this many people, this many rooms in the hotel, this is the main meeting planner, just so, here's the VIPs, just to kind of give you a brief rundown. I mean, how many of those are you looking at? Like, especially a convention hotel, you're looking at, multiple a week, many. It's just
Very many.
yet another resume. I mean, you're just going through the process, like you can't, it's not your fault that you tend to just go through the motions after a while. But if you kind of keep that big picture in mind of what each group really means and represents, because honestly, and maybe you're right, no, you are right. This past year absolutely did show the importance as each group canceled. And again, not just the citywides, but everything, as all these different meetings were not allowed to happen. I mean, it's billions of dollars leaving, not coming into your property, not coming into the city.
So I actually want to, because you were at On Peak at the
Yes.
time. Okay. So first of all, what is On Peak? Because I'm sure very few people
Sure.
know what that is. So what is that?
Yes. So On Peak is well, we used to call it a housing bureau. Housing bureau is the basic name.
Yeah,
Which
that's how I
means,
know it in
yeah,
my world.
I could also call it a third party event accommodations provider. That might be the more
Ooh,
formal way to put it.
okay.
Yes. So, basically a third party though. What housing bureaus do, or accommodations providers do, is we organize and sell sleeping rooms to trade show organizers and conventions and meetings. So we had our own reservation platform. So my team handled we would contract with the hotels to secure the room blocks, secure the rates, secure enough rooms to bring an event, to be able to house it in a city. And then we would sell those rooms to the convention attendees through our own platform.
Right. And so it sounds kind of complicated for some people, probably because it's
Yeah.
like, wait, what? And in a lot of ways it is, but in a lot of ways it isn't. For those of you who've ever worked in primarily in front office roles in cities that utilize these housing bureaus, you're probably you might be aware of and remember sending out the who from the group no showed, who what kind of pickup did you have, right? These reports that you had to complete by 8 a.m. the following day. So the housing bureau knew where there were still rooms available. So
Yeah.
and again, this is just another example of everybody really having to work together, because you have, in a lot of ways, sometimes an hourly like supervisor, for example, at a front desk, whose accuracy and ability to fill out these reports and send it to the housing bureau is actually critical to the economic development of the city, and also to the experience of the attendees, and to the key performance indicators for the actual hotels themselves. Because if you have a citywide and you're not selling out, sheesh,
Right.
that's an L on you for sure. If you didn't manage to do that. So it overall, it is very important. And it's just another component when you have a housing bureau. You've really done it all, Jen. Now that I'm realizing it, you have the housing bureau component, you have the CVB component, which those two are working hand in hand to provide the accommodations. And then you also have the out of property experience. But what I want to ask you is you mentioned, right, when the pandemic happened, the genuinely billions of dollars that are walking out the door essentially, and you're working it on peak. So you're seeing this like literally boom, 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 boom,
Yes.
boom, boom. So tell me about that. How did it
Yeah.
feel? That's crazy.
It was sickening, to be honest. Like it was pure shock. Because, and not to call out a specific group, but I remember the first one to cancel was International Housewares Association, which was, a big annual March convention. And, they 100% made the right decision. At the time, it was like, what are they doing? Because I was an early, I don't want to say I didn't believe the pandemic was really happening, but it was just kind of like, I could not wrap my mind around what was actually happening. It was just so foreign to all of us. Right. But then it was now in other cities, because, at On Peak, we had about 180 clients, 400 events a year. And so we had events all over the country. And so another massive program canceled on the West Coast. It was like, okay, wait. And then it was just like dominoes just starting to fall. And, housing bureaus, we rely on commission for the rooms that we sell. So 10% or 7% as was what started in 2018, commission from some of the big brands. But yeah, commission. So without selling rooms, without the events happening, we couldn't sell the rooms. Without selling the rooms, we couldn't make any money. So it was very, very obvious to see that all of a sudden our loss of revenue was just, we were just halt. No revenue. Very scary.
Honestly, like, I had like chills for like 7 seconds straight because you mentioned the home and houseware show. And I remember also being like, at the hotel, and we're ready for this, because it's like, it was seriously like very close to happening. It must have been maybe a week or so before when it canceled to the actual like arrival dates of starting the program. Like, it was so close, and we're like, all right, convention season is back, baby. Like, home and housewares, like, let's start off this season with a bang. We're on cloud 9 because the beginning of 2020 was just incredible.
So incredible.
Seriously, first quarter up until the pandemic, right? It was like, especially in Chicago, was like the first quarter, like a unicorn that we'd never seen before. We had like NBA All-Star Weekend and all these different things that were going on in the city. Revenues were great. And we were really ramping up for this convention. And seriously, like, the same sickening feeling that you had, I remember feeling that too with home and housewares. I remember that domino feeling that you mentioned, where the reservations manager of the hotel would just like, literally, it was like, I was like, I want to unsubscribe from this, because she kept sending out emails after email, like to everybody. This group canceled, this many room nights gone. This group canceled, this many room nights gone. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. And then you can see, as the room blocks get taken away, you can just see, like, in the PMS, what's on the books. And then you start to see the projected occupancy percentages deteriorating rapidly. And that's why I think it was like, for a lot of people, when you have these conversations, I'm sorry, but you're being laid off. Like, everybody was like pretty much understanding, because they can literally go and see it themselves, that this is like completely unprecedented.
What? I've never heard that word.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know what the other option could have been. There was just no money coming in for the hotels, or for organizations like mine, which 100% relied on meetings and conventions. So,
well, and I think it's important to note, because I've said this before on other episodes, but what we thought could never happen happened. The guests stopped coming. Who would have thought? Right. And actually, this is my first crisis in the industry that I've worked through. You mentioned 9/11 earlier. Also 2008, because that's afterward. I assume that you were obviously familiar with that as well. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this was really the first time that, based on my research, that the guests like genuinely stopped coming. Like we're talking like 2% occupancy at hotels. We're talking like was that even a thing during like 2008 and during 9/11, like that low, like for such a prolonged period?
Not such a prolonged period. Now, the email that you wanted to unsubscribe from, I remember it being on a similar list after 9/11. I actually was stuck on Hilton Head Island as 9/11 occurred. So I couldn't get back home for a few days because I couldn't get a
Mm,
flight. And I ended up renting a car with somebody, and we drove our way back home. But when I finally did make it back to the hotel, I was greeted with just so many emails. This group canceled, that group canceled. So that was a scary thing at the time, but I was still really new in the industry. I mean, I'd only been working for about a year and a half at that point. So it didn't have the same meaning to me
right.
that it did now. And it also recovered so much quicker. I mean, airline business was grounded for a while, but I mean, there was still local business. I wouldn't say that meetings stopped 100%. It was just people couldn't really get on an airplane easily and travel for a little bit, but that it rectified pretty quickly, at least compared to what we just all went through.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I guess like my point is, as we are now coming out of this, right? We've seen the guests stop coming. So what lessons can we learn as a collective industry, CVBs, events, hotels? What can we learn as we kind of come together and come through this? Like what's your biggest reflection from all this as we can uh, kind of move forward here?
I just think there's a big opportunity to really work together in ways that we haven't before. And I mean, this industry is amazing because we do work together well. We do. But like we talked about, there is always room for improvement. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we can do differently. And I don't know how long we're going to have to go through and accommodate safety. I'm unclear on how long we're going to have to come up with different kind of measures. I mean, it seems like since the CDC made their announcement about not really requiring masks anymore for vaccinated individuals, that a lot of safety requirements are kind of going out the window a little bit. It's
Mhm.
already seeming like it's something from the past. But I think that for a while, if we want to bring people back together in any capacity, in any kind of venue, be it a hotel or a restaurant or coming to the city for a convention, there might have to be some kind of interesting and unique ways to make that happen, like the restaurants did over the winter, putting their outdoor igloos and that kind of thing. But aside from safety measures and that kind of thing, it's just an opportunity to truly understand what each party is going through and to truly understand the roles that everyone plays in their success. Now, we talked a little bit before about you as a hotelier and saying, oh, I had an opportunity to inform my staff and I didn't always take that,
Yeah.
about the importance. We got to put it on the other side too. Meeting planners, event organizers.
Damn, you're right.
I
You're right.
understand, you know, do they all know, or do they all take the time to educate themselves on the hotel engineering department and the hotel
No,
and the
they don't.
housekeeping department? And like some people might say, well, why do I need to know that? I'm not saying you need to know all the ins and outs of these things, but just a general awareness and conscientiousness about the fact that these things are all happening and coming together to make your stay feel seamless. I mean, you on the hotel side know what it takes to have those doors open every day. And I just really desire for everybody, and meeting planners and event organizers included, to understand what it really takes to make these things happen. I was just in Vegas recently, and I love going to Las Vegas because you see these 5,000 room properties making it happen. Like all these departments. I mean, it's a massive effort. You cannot do that without a fine-tuned operation and incredible leadership and dedication and passion of employees. that's a big deal. So organizers, meeting planners, like, have appreciation for that, for what these hotels do. And especially now, all this, extra sanitizing and all the things that are happening. I mean, it's such a great amount that people are going to jump through hoops to try to get your business back in the door. So extra patience and consideration on all sides is going to be necessary for a long time.
That's so like cool of you to say, I guess. Like, you're right. It's to accommodate the business that event planners and CVBs want to bring. It's really difficult to do that, to make it happen, to accommodate it, to allow this to occur in the first place. And I definitely think there's room for improvement on that, because it's the expectations on both sides, I think, could be just like we want to manage the guest expectations. We want to manage the expectations as a community as we work together. Because do event planners know that we're in the middle of a labor crisis right now and a labor shortage? Exactly. Do they know? Like, I'm actually genuinely curious, because if they don't know, that is going to impact the way that, that they communicate to their clients who are wanting to bring this business. And, another thing that I learned from Nikki and Robin from the Room Block, which was a great statement that I will carry with me, is that sales sells, ops resells. So if we have a labor crisis, right? Isn't that cool?
That's very cool. Yeah.
So if we have a labor crisis and the expectation from the event planner to the client bringing the business is that everything is normal and that there's really nothing out of the ordinary taking place, we're coming back from this crisis, but don't worry, we welcome your business. Then we're going to be really not doing right by that business when they show up and there's a labor shortage and the rooms aren't ready, or there's no breakfast available, or whatever the case might be. So that's just one example of, do they know it? And how can we, I don't know, how can we really make sure that they're up to date on what's going on with us, and we're up to date on what's going on with them? But I think you've done a good job of that with your show.
Well, I was going to say, we can put that information on our podcast and just keep putting it out there, right? Like that is what I see as our responsibility as people with the platform, to just educate where we can. And it's not even, your example of the staffing crisis is perfect, and that's a current crisis that people should hopefully be aware of and educate their teams on the event side. But just in general, I mean, my ability to understand the way all these different parts work together is only because I've worked in them. I've worked on all sides. And I've never been an actual meeting planner, but being in that third party position, I have the voice of the meeting planner in my head, and I have a very good understanding of what's important to them. And then being on the hotel side, same thing. But if I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have known. I mean, we had the conversation, you asked, what is the significance of events? Not having worked on that side, it's not something you've personally experienced. So I think there's a lot of people who haven't necessarily jumped on all sides of the industry, right, like I have. And I'm not advising that you should do that, but if you haven't, it can benefit you to learn about it and to understand the importance of how all the different aspects, they have to work together. It's like a symphony.
Yeah, definitely. And like, obviously not completely, but really not a shameless plug for either of our shows, really, but truly a way to, just an opportunity to supplement your industry experience with a little bit of a change in perspective and education that you may not get when you're working in the narrow confines of your current role. or if you are, for example, in a market that is, let's just say like a roadside rural kind of off the highway market, and you're working in a select service or economy, or maybe even a mid-scale property, like this is how the industry works in other areas. And then I think as well, like one thing that I've been actively trying to do a better job on at Hospitality MD is trying to make people like us who are from Chicago aware of like what happens in these rural areas, or like off the high, like because that's really the heartbeat and the soul of and more representative of the lodging industry in the United States. So I think we can overall in many ways bridge the gap, because this industry is so abundant, and there's so many things within hotels, within events, CVBs, event planners. Like it's so abundant, and we got to connect. We got to do it. We got to work together. With that being said, any final sentiments from you, Jen? I think that's pretty much it. What do you think?
I think you hit it on the head there. I love that you mentioned also our responsibility as, we are fortunate to sit here in a tier 1 city, and to have a multitude of resources within our world. You're right. It's important to also understand what happens outside of a big city, and what the struggles are that other aspects of this industry face in other areas. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think I would try to do that for myself more often as well. But aside from that, no, I feel a buzz in the air. And I'm, so excited about the return of live events, the return of tourism in general. And I just really, I desire to contribute to it in some positive way. So if it's just by having these conversations and talking about ways that we can make it better, then, I'm here for that. And I'm just excited. Thank you for letting me come on the show and talk about it.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. And actually, for everybody listening, I have an idea of how Jen can contribute, which is her being a moderator for any events, virtual or live. And no, she is not sponsoring this episode. She's just a really damn good moderator. Even on Clubhouse too. We were just remember Clubhouse, everybody?
Right. No, thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
But Jen, why don't you give us, if we weren't already plugging before, why don't you plug your show, plug you? Let's give everybody an opportunity to connect with you, because if you like Hospitality MD, you'll love the Room Block.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, sure. Yes. So I put it this way. I'm a 20-year veteran of the hospitality and events industry, turned podcast host, moderator, and event personality.
Oh.
And so, what is an event personality? What I call it is somebody, a host, MC, moderator, interviewer, booth presentations. I like to talk. I like to connect the dots. I like to connect with an audience. So I can do that for you.
Awesome. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just say you can find roomblockpodcast.com. That's where the show lives, and as well as on all the major podcast platforms.
And you guys don't have to remember that. Links will be in the description if you're watching on YouTube, show notes if you're listening in on the audio platforms, as well as Jen's LinkedIn, where she is actively posting content and engaging with others. Yeah, Jen, thank you for your contributions to hospitality. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you for being a friend. You're awesome.
Oh, thank you, Kyle. You are a wonderful friend and podcaster as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. This has been another episode of the Hospitality MD podcast, the most hospitable podcast in the industry. Sorry, Jen. I'm just kidding.
No, you're good. It is.
All right. Boom. Well, we're off the record
now.
The
recording has stopped.
I think we had a great conversation. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the very end of this video. We hope you took away some valuable insights and learnings from my conversation with Jen. I know I certainly learned a lot during our conversation. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Tell us what your biggest takeaway was in the comments, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We love you. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for keeping up with Hospitality MD.